Welcome to Not Another Baptist Podcast, where we discuss what we're learning in church revitalization as well as church planting and other Southern Baptist topics. Christmas music is playing on the radio. Our churches are in the middle of their Advent seasons. White elephant parties are popping up everywhere, and all are praying for a hedge of protection to surround their debit and credit cards as they get Christmas gifts for their family and friends. I'm Matt Hensley, pastor of Mayhill Baptist, and I'm joined as always by Kyle Bierman, pastor of First Baptist in Alamogordo, and we're glad that you joined up on this dumpster fire as we discuss some of the dumb stuff we do, like boycotts around Christmas, but also a look at our sermon prep and music ministries. Kyle, how's life?
It's going well, man. Like you said, it's crazy. This time of year, there's always something going on. It seems like almost every day there's something happening, whether that's a party or a meeting or something, but it's good. How about you?
Man, our kids are already counting down the days until Christmas break, until going back to grandma's house where there's no rules at all.
Right. There you go.
But Advent is in full swing at Mayhill. Seems like we have a party just about every day of the week right about now. But I wouldn't change it for the world. Yet it's also the time of year, Kyle, when people start posting this guy, Joshua Feuerstein or
Feuerstein.
The guy with the little baseball cap turned backwards, and he's yelling on the Facebook Live or whatever, telling us that we are supporting the devil when we shop at Starbucks. So when I go to Starbucks now, take me a little Sharpie, and as soon as she hands me the cup, I write back, Merry Christmas, you filthy animal.
Heathen.
That is how you spread holiday cheer around Christmas, as you remind them that Jesus was born.
That's right.
Merry Christmas, you filthy. Kyle?
Well, see, so I have a cup here from Plateau Espresso, and you can see it's just a plain white cup. There's nothing on it at all.
That's holy and pure.
Yes, that's right. Yes, like the baby Jesus himself.
He was not that white. We got to catch it.
That's great.
Yeah. Woo. Okay. Kyle, let's talk real quick.
Yeah.
Before we get into sermon prep and all of that, this whole Merry Christmas boycotts or boycotts in general, how should we look at that? Certainly as pastors, but really as Christians in general.
Sure. So I kind of tend to see most boycotts as totally pointless. So, all right. So there's a corporation who you feel isn't supporting Christmas because they refuse to say Merry Christmas. And so you're going to go boycott it to send a message to the CEO. You know, my question is, does boycotting that hurt the CEO more, or does it hurt either the single mom or the college student who's working as a barista or a cashier, who, if you're boycotting their store's taking the front end of those losses? I just don't think that sends a message of hope and joy and peace and love like we talk about every Sunday during Advent. And you know, in the same message, you know, when you're greeted by the words Happy Holidays at some store, you know, screaming back, it's Merry Christmas. You know, so as we know, right? I mean, Buddy the Elf told us the best way to spread Christmas cheer is singing loud for all to hear. Those who boycott would tell us it's screaming as loud as you can, Merry Christmas.
Yes.
You filthy heathen. So no, I just never have seen the point of those wide scale boycotts.
Yeah. And I like to remind myself first that the lost will act like the lost.
That's right.
We shouldn't expect them to act like they're saved or to understand all of that stuff unless, well, they're saved. Right. I mean, that comes with the territory. But second, you know, like you mentioned with your cup there, we here in Alamo, or you here in Alamo, have Plateau Espresso. We've got one in Cloudcroft that's a pretty good coffee shop. Yeah. So I don't really have to go into Starbucks, so it really doesn't affect me a whole lot. But at the same time, I also know that I've learned how to share the gospel with, you know, the 4 spiritual laws or with the Roman road, with the ABC, all that sort of thing. I've never found it effective to bark back at somebody and say, Merry Christmas, and them suddenly say, tell me how to be baptized, or tell me how to be saved. Like, that's usually not the end result of that. That doesn't seem to be the best route. And that needs to be our goal, is not to get somebody to say Merry Christmas. It's ultimately to get somebody to join us in heaven. That's not going to be the road to get that. Then that's probably not going to be the route I'm going to take. So when it comes to boycotts, then, whether it's good intentioned or ill intentioned, we need to remember that our foundation, though, is not on a boycott, but in the unity that we have in Jesus Christ, his glorious gospel. And as a brother in Christ, from wherever you're listening to this dumpster fire, and today it's definitely already a dumpster fire, I encourage you to take all issues, even boycotts, to the Word of God and decide for yourselves. Let others decide for themselves, and then focus your attention on what should unite us, what must be our focus, and that is proclaiming Jesus Christ, not whether or not a secular organization says Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays. But that's enough of that nonsense, and hardly the focus for this podcast. We had some of our listeners ask us to discuss sermon prep. We talked about it a little bit when we were trying to shove a McRib down our mouth on a little bonus content on our Facebook page. Shout out to follow us there at Not Another Baptist Podcast. Shameless self-promotion there. But we thought we'd take a moment here in the episode to discuss it a little further, and hopefully to help you, if you're a pastor or if you're a member, to know maybe what your pastors are doing, laboring for you to bring you a faithful message on Sunday. So we'll start with Kyle. Tell us about a normal week of sermon prep. We know those are few and far between, but if you could have it your way, what's a normal week of sermon prep?
So I'm not sure I've experienced a normal week yet, but if I were to have my way, I would really like to front load my sermon prep, meaning Monday and Tuesday, really heavy into sermon prep, and then mostly being done with my message by Tuesday afternoon. And the weeks that happens, it's awesome. And so as we've talked, I mean, I'm kind of working now to front load a bunch of stuff for next year during December. You and I were talking before we went live about that, and I'll share that just a little bit more. But I really do. I like to get started Monday afternoon after doing some admin stuff. Monday afternoon, really digging into the text as much as possible, taking some notes I've already made through some front end study, and then laying out my outline, fleshing that out a little bit more on Tuesday. But for the most part, on those weeks when it works, my message by the end of Tuesday looks a lot like what I take into the pulpit with me. And then I have the rest of the week to ruminate on it, make some corrections, search for some illustrations, and just kind of pray over that passage and that content the rest of the week, getting ready to proclaim it on Sunday morning. How about you? What does your week look like?
Well, my week really changed when school started. Back when I first started pastoring, I loved the rhythm that I had of, kind of like you, jumping in on it Monday morning, bright and early, and getting as much done then as I possibly could. But here in Mayhill, or particularly in Cloudcroft, since our kids are off on Monday, I've tried to carve that day and make that my day off as much as I possibly can. And so I've tweaked it a bit and tried to push it off to Tuesday, and that's somewhat risky because Tuesday has things that I have to do. Right. Wednesday obviously has some things. Thursday morning is carved out already. And so I try my best to hold off until Tuesday. Sometimes I'll do a little bit Sunday afternoon if I have a little free time, but mostly I wait until Tuesday. And I jump in, as I said on our video about this, really just reading the text over and over and over again, really trying to internalize it, working through it when I'm able to in the Greek and the Hebrew, if that's the case, translating it myself, however rough that may be, or even heretical. I mean, I try to get it right, but sometimes it's still a little rough. It's been a while, but this helps me really to soak in that passage, to internalize it before I've even cracked open a commentary, before I've written a single outline. I already pretty well know that sermon, and if something happened already that week and I was had to go travel or I had to go do a funeral or whatever, Sunday could roll around and I would probably be able to preach it pretty well because I just know it.
Right.
And, but that wouldn't be my preference. I would like to get in, have a good outline and so forth. So once I've really got it, internalized or whatever, I'll start working out an outline for me, and then I'll walk through the text and write out some explanations, applications, illustrations, and I can really, I guess, explain a text all day. That's my easy thing. That's what kind of comes natural to me. But the struggle for me is really application. And I think we talked about this before, that I want to make sure that they don't just understand the text, but they really know why this text matters to them now and what they need to take from this sermon, not just a full of head knowledge. What does this affect my heart and my day-to-day life? But Kyle, for me, this might work out maybe about 12 to 15 hours per sermon a week when it's possible, and that's spread out a bit. What about you? How long does it take you to get one of yours done?
Yeah, so with an expository sermon, since I've done a whole lot of work on the front end of that, each week I'm going to say somewhere probably between 5 to 7 hours to actually build out the message itself, and a lot like you, I'll sit down with just the text itself. I can't translate straight out of the Greek or Hebrew, so I'm dealing with the cool Southern Baptist version, right?
It's basically the same thing,
right? Yeah.
It's what Jesus used anyway.
So, but I'll sit down with just the passage and kind of like you read it over and over and over, and I'll basically have, most weeks I'll have my 3 points or 3, 5, whatever. Most of the time for me, they're 3. I'll have them out of just the text,
alliterated.
As often as possible.
Okay.
I try to.
Okay.
Just
I don't know how Baptist you were.
No, yeah. So I used to not care about that, and then I started listening more and more to guys like Adrian Rogers, who are really good at that, and I went, man, there's just something about the flow of the message. So if possible, I'm not going to force it, but if possible, yeah, I will. But a lot of times those points will come out of just the text before I crack a commentary, and sometimes those change. But oftentimes they don't. I mean, if I'm, as I'm walking through 1 John right now, I'll just read the passage and I'll kind of figure out, okay, what's the overall point of what he's getting at in this passage, and then what are some ways that I can better explain that, to flesh it out a little bit. And so I have the shell of most messages before I ever crack open a commentary. Again, that's not every week. Yeah. There's some weeks I'll read the passage and go,
what?
Exactly. Yeah.
Come again.
So dive into a commentary to help kind of get me thinking along the way.
When that happens, just open up the message.
Oh, then just the message. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So one of the things that I love is after you've put all of that work in and you've labored over it all week, it's kind of like cooking a fancy meal. Yeah. Like it takes all day, Thanksgiving to prepare all of that. And then everybody's done eating in like 35 minutes. That's right. The same thing is true with our sermons. We've put 10, 15, maybe 20 hours in them, blood, sweat, and tears to get this out, or we just went to desiringgod.org and printed one off, whatever it is. But we've put all of that work in, and then you jump in the pulpit and it's over before you know it. And then comes the comments after. And one of the things that I love to hear is, hey, when you said blank, it really encouraged me to think about blank. Instead of just great sermon, pastor, you gave it a good college try today. Yeah. Something like, I really want to hear that they've heard the message and how it's already impacting them, or even better, if I hear that on Tuesday or Thursday, that's even better. But my mother, I love my mom to death, but she will listen to a sermon and she'll call me and she said, "Man, I listened to your sermon. It was great. You had this joke in there and I laughed and laughed and laughed." Like that's all she hears. It's like she doesn't have a clue that I parsed the words right or that I had this great sermon and a great application. She doesn't have a clue. She's looking for the verse. For the joke in there. That's what she hears from it. But anyway, it's nice to hear when you've put in all of that work, how it's impacting their life. And because the labor is certainly not in vain. That word is not going to come back void. And that's a promise that keeps us going, I'm pretty sure. But Kyle, we have some that are listening here that are full-time pastors that are spending 40, 50, 60 hours a week in the office or with funerals or all of that kind of stuff. Or we have people that are working 40 to 50 hours at another job and then trying to preach on Sunday. Is there any words of encouragement that you can get with these guys?
To these guys? So I'm coming at this from a full-time pastor standpoint, right? But I don't have a staff. So I am the sole full-time staff member at our church. So hear that in what I'm about to say. Even in that role, like I don't feel like I can spend 20 hours a week in the study preparing for a message, because to do so is going to be to neglect some other responsibilities that I have, whether that's making hospital visits or even if I'm not in somebody's home every day, at least, making phone calls or something like that, checking on them. So what I'm trying to do now is we're recording this the first full week of December. I'm spending the month of December and really laying out a lot of my preaching calendar for the next year. And not just so down to like what passages I'm planning to preach what Sundays, but then also going through and doing a lot of that front end study, background stuff and all that, and putting that all into a spreadsheet or into a Word document, so that when the time comes to open up those passages on that week, I've got so many notes already done and so much of that study that's already been prepared, that I can look back at some of the notes I've made in December and get ready to preach that. And so again, if somebody's working a full-time job, I know it's a little bit different, but if you can find a time to carve out ahead of time and really dive into some commentaries, do some cultural studies, all that's gonna decrease the amount of time you got to spend each week incredibly when time comes. And maybe even what I'm going to try to do is even go through and for a lot of the passages, get the basic outlines together, so that when I start in the week, I've at least got, even if the points change a little bit, I've got the basic outline of the passage ready to go.
Awesome. Well, we wanted to talk a little bit about Christmas music or Advent singing. We try to keep these short and to the point. So suffice it to say, Kyle will be doing the special music at First Alamo this Sunday, and he'll be singing Christmas Shoes.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
I want to
or
buy
Mary,
these.
did you know?
Oh, yeah. Mary IDK.
Please don't boycott us.
but good talk. I love talking about sermons, but I love preaching them even more than talking about them. And we hope that this pod somehow encouraged you, whether you're a member or a pastor, in the hard work that is preaching the word. As we wrap this up, remember to follow Not Another Baptist Podcast on Facebook and at NAB_podcast on Twitter to stay up to date with this train wreck. It has been helpful, or if it has been helpful, share it and then pop down a little 5-star review so we can keep these coming. But until next Friday, may your coffee be as black as night and bold as the gospel you proclaim. And Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Yeah.